The Green Party has passed a motion to abolish landlords during conference over the weekend, a motion which included policies that disincentivise private landlords passed with an overwhelming majority. And the motion includes introduce rent controls and abolish right to buy, abolish Section 21 evictions and make all rental agreements secure long-term tenancies that can only be terminated by the tenant, land value tax levied on owners, not tenants, no exceptions, business rates on Airbnbs, short lets, no exceptions, double taxation for empty properties, puts national insurance on private rents, remove finance for landlords, and end buy-to-let mortgages, provide government-backed finance to tenants, give tenants first right to buy when landlords sell, with their total rent paid discounted, provide finance to councils, councils should be given second right to buy when landlords sell, government must change prudential borrowing requirements to allow councils to buy back and build new housing on a massive scale. Now, since the motion passed, unsurprisingly, many attacked the policy. Labour MP Chris Bryant tweeted this: I have no idea what such a policy might mean. I mean, it might help to read the policy. I mean, if you don't understand what it means, have a look at it. Although the first leader of the Labour Party understands the policy very well. So as you can see, this is like the original manifesto, shall we say, and it says no landlordism. Now, clearly, Chris Bryant didn't get the memo. He's a landlord himself. Labour MP Chris Bryant made £649,500 in gross profit selling 2 London flats the taxpayer helped pay the mortgage interest on. When the rules changed, preventing MPs from claiming mortgage interest, the Rhondda MP rented out the penthouse he owns for around £3,000 a month and claims £84,350 from the taxpayer to rent a different property to live in himself. Now, according to some, this policy equals communism. What next? A ban on factions? Literal communism. Now, I'm sorry, but that's literally not communism, but it sounds like they're trying to threaten us with a good time. Now, content creator Hypatias Lantern said this: the Greens are fundamentally an unserious party. Now, if you see, they have a red rosette in their name. I mean, Labour, the party that championed Keynesian economics, who was famously anti-landlord, thinks addressing the housing crisis is unserious. Radical centrist dad Nick Tyrone, of course, weighed in. Further proof, had it been required, that the Green Party is not a serious party. So, we have communism and not being a serious party, when the motion simply calls for policies that predates Margaret Thatcher. Now, earlier on today, I spoke to Alexander Salans, Green Party member and co-author of the motion. Can you explain the policies within the motion and why these will help tackle the housing crisis?
Yeah, so landlordism fundamentally was on its deathbed at the end of the late 1970s. We had gone through such a heavy period of regulation of taxes, and then the actual competition in the housing market that represented by mass council house building at the end of World War II. The policies in this are essentially just going back to that. So rent controls, we're going to end right to buy, which is it's taking the plug out of the bath that is the supply of council housing. We're going to end finance to landlords in the form of buy-to-let mortgages, which just gives them an access to cheap credit. We're going to tax them in the form of land value tax, and coupled with rent controls, that means that it will be levied on the landlord and not the tenant, but also add national insurance onto private rents. We're going to make sure that we are buying back these privately rented properties so that councils can rent them out as council housing. That's not just when the landlord sells, but it's also if it's not insulated properly, as well as if it's kept empty. We're going to tax short-term lets to try and bring them back into onto the market. bring them back into council ownership. And finally, we're going to the last policy, which is a personal favourite of mine, is the establishment of a state-owned housing manufacturing company, which councils would be able to go to, and it would be specialised in building council housing on a mass scale. But it would also have a mandate to innovate on design, on architecture, on manufacturing techniques, and really like providing the well-skilled, long-term unionized jobs that we actually need in the country.
So what was the reception like at conference? I mean, did this pass easily, or was there kind of a robust debate to get this through?
I think that there was a good debate. There was a good debate on the plenary floor. There was a lot of goodwill in in the conference. I had a few people come up to me um, arguing against it, but nothing nothing bad. It's not Labour Party conference. Not that I've ever been to one. Um, I would say in the room, say what it wasn't close, otherwise we would have actually counted the votes. But I would say in the plenary hall, it was about 80-20 in favour. I mean, I'll be honest, a lot of the objections to the motion were about the title and about the tone, and not about the substantive policies or even just being anti-landlord. There weren't that many people there who wanted to argue against the fact that landlordism is bad. It was mostly just, should we be saying this, loud and proud? Should we be arguing against landlordism as an institution? Because I think the thing which differentiates landlordism in the UK to say Germany or America is landlords are people. They are in the UK individuals. There are 2.5 million of them. Whereas in America, America or Germany, they tend to be corporate entities. They tend to be companies, which are obviously a lot easier to other in that sense.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. The motion is called Abolish Landlords. Now, of course, when you look into the detail of the policy, it's not really abolishing, it's disincentivizing new landlords, almost self-abolishment. But the title, was that something that was thought about for a long time? Because I understand some people may have been opposed to sort of such a direct sort of communication on what the policy is. But do you think that abolish landlords was or is part of the new direction of the Green Party, which is to be bolder and more and have more direction? Was that something that factored into the title?
I mean, we did. So me and the person I co-wrote the original motion with last year, Martin Farley, we did uh, want it to capture attention. Partly this is because most of this policy, other than the state-owned housing manufacturer, most of this policy has been Green Party policy for years, and no one talks about it because for the longest time we have not talked about policy in a way which captures the imagination, in a way that really speaks to the actual political situation in the country. We don't talk in terms of narrative and story. We tend to talk in terms of policies, individual, kind of siloed policies in a vacuum, and it just doesn't connect to people. And so this was an effort to connect to people, to connect to their lived experience, and to provide them with a narrative about the housing crisis, and that is a concentration of wealth, of housing wealth in particular, in this case, in the hands of landlords, and the need to redistribute that. I think it should be the start of a new direction for how the Green Party treats its conference and its policy making process. Um, some new members are always surprised that there aren't these great political debates at conference like the fringes. They tend not to be about the politics, and they tend to be about the individual policies. There's one on PR, there's one on UBI, but it's never really about the way that we want the economy to function or the way that we want our democracy to function. This is, I think, a kind of a challenge to our policy working groups, to the people proposing policies, that you need to make it interesting. You need to make it interesting, not just to the people inside the room, which is important. I think if it was just like stop the housing crisis, I don't think it would have connected, but to the people outside of conference as well, to the media, to, every person on the street, make it interesting for social media, make it go viral, because that's how we change the narrative as a political party.
Some people could have a lot of questions about this policy, maybe if they haven't read through the detail of it. What is your response to some who say, "Oh, this will make people who are currently renting homeless"?
I mean, it won't. Look, if the person, it won't. If the landlord sells, the house does not like implode as though the landlord was holding it together, like Samson with his bare hands. He just won't. If the landlord sells, as if the policies are enacted, if the landlord sells, either the council will buy it, or they get first right of refusal, or another landlord buys it, or the tenant buys it, or someone else buys it who will live it, who will live in it. That tenant can be given council housing. That tenant will be able to buy another home, because the whole premise of the motion is to make housing affordable, not just rented housing, but to bring down the price of housing, to make it more affordable. You know, that is one of the key purposes of a land value tax. To decommodify land, to decommodify housing, to make it more affordable, so that we can actually live our lives without having to worry about being homeless. I think there are a lot of people who treat landlordism like a certainty, and I said this in the room. The Green Party fundamentally exists to look beyond the certainties that we are told. It looks. We are there to imagine a better world, and to imagine how we get there. Okay, and then to try and do it, to try and achieve that. And people can call that utopian, people can call that unserious. you know Imagination is not a sin. Imagination and hope, they're not some sort of childish endeavor. They should be what we all aspire to try and make a better world, not just to try and do like 1%, 2%, 3%, here and there, or to try and manage decline. No, I think the Green Party exists to be better than that, and I think that's why we are where we are now.
Last question. If someone can't get a mortgage, will there be social housing available for them? And for those that still want to rent, will council houses be available for rent?
Yeah. So this isn't an abolition of renting. This is about saying that the two main factors in the housing market will be owner occupiers or council housing. You know, there is still the rest of the pie, which will be social housing providers. Although the Green Party would obviously like housing associations to be democratic organizations. But there are things like housing co-ops and communes and all those kind of things, which again should be democratic. But this is about saying that it's owner occupiers, council housing. That's those are the biggest slices of the pie, and we should be building council housing at a scale that anyone that wants one can get one. Okay, and again, people can say that's unrealistic, but that's what council housing was invented for. That's what it was built for. Okay, if you want, let's say I got a job in Bristol. I live in Brighton. I should be able to go and rent a council house there, and there should be stock enough for that to happen. Council housing needs to be redefined beyond the idea that it is just temporary accommodation or emergency accommodation, or accommodation for poor people. It needs to be, no, we need to redefine it and move to a situation much closer to what they have in Vienna, where council housing is for everyone. It's for doctors, it's for teachers, it's for accountants, it's for anyone that wants one. It could be for students. Say you move across the country to go study in another city. You could be living in a council flat. And that's normal, that's respectable. That's what we need to move towards.
So that was Alexander Salons, co-author of the motion. Megan, what are your thoughts on this motion being passed, and also those who've attacked this as communism?
Ooh, well, first and foremost, I just want to address the title of it, because I read an interesting study recently that was published on Nature.com, that found out of 35 million public Facebook posts, 75% of forwarded links were shared without clicking on them. So, what I mean, I know that he said that he wants to make an impact, and that's why he chose the title. But I think we're living in an age as well where people are sharing, articles, news articles, without even looking at what is being said in the article, and then that's causing further division between the populace. So I that was my initial thought when I read the policy after hearing the title of it. So I'm just gonna. The word communism has been thrown around so much; it's almost starting to lose meaning. People say communist, just like they say fascist, without understanding what these words mean, or what communism means. So I'm not surprised when people are calling it communist. It's almost expected at this point. Whatever a policy that they don't agree with is communism or socialism. It's almost like in the woodwork of our political landscape right now. So that was my first impression of that. But the bill itself. Now I come from a family of landlords, so I think I have a very interesting perspective or unique perspective on this because I do 100% believe that a huge part of the issues behind the UK's housing crisis is a lack of social homes. So there definitely needs to be a focus on that. I do believe that private landlordism can still coexist, albeit with um, regulation. It needs to be heavily regulated. My parents are landlords; they're good people. I think there's a lot of people on the left, especially, and I've been there. I've been on both sides of the equation. I've lived in homes that have had horrible landlords. But it's so easy to say that, oh, every landlord is evil, when that's not the case, because my mom's not evil. I think they're just taking advantage of a system that has landlords, like capitalism and all that. So I do think that they can coexist. I want to say as well, a big problem, like we can argue that the one landlord who has one property is the issue, but a bigger issue, and it is happening because you have Blackstone and BlackRock buying up property in the UK and monopolizing the housing market. It's happening more and more. It's already happened in the US, it's happening here. And that is a huge thing that we need to prevent, because that is worse. That is much worse than one person owning a rental. Because that as soon as that happens in the UK, and it's happening more and more, we need to just stop that. Um, uh, we just need to stop that completely. Also, something that is happening as well is a huge percentage of the population is aging, and a large percentage of homeowners are pensioners. So in the next like 10, 20 years, there's going to be a lot more houses coming in on the market that were previously owned by pensioners. What's going to happen? They're going to be bought up because they're not going to be bought up by regular people. They're going to be bought up by um, the wealthy corporations, because regular people are not going to be able to afford them. So we definitely need to have plans in place to be able to prevent. Um, Basically, it's an inevitable catastrophe of all these homes being on the market and just sitting empty because nobody can afford them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point you made. About the name of the bill, which is abolish landlords. Of course, it's not actually abolishing them overnight. It's
Yeah.
just a robust housing policy which disincentivizes private landlords, right? And I asked the question, I was like, what was the thought process that went into it? And I think for them, it was like, under Zach Palansky, the party has become more bold, more direct, and I think that was done on purpose.
Mhm.
I'm with you there. I mean, a lot of people will read the headlines, don't look into the policy, but I kind of feel like those that are against it were never sort of supportive of it anyway. In terms of sort of individual people versus corporations, I'm really glad you brought up BlackRock. There is a huge systemic issue when it comes to commercial landlordism. When you've got individuals or companies buying a hell of a lot of housing, lots of them, and renting them
Mhm.
out. There is obviously a difference between that and like an individual landlord. And I think what's to me good about these policies is it's not like we're going to ban it and it's illegal to be a landlord overnight, because that
Mhm.
wouldn't work. But rather, I think you're going to, at least if these policies were implemented, you will probably see like a 5 to 10 year transition period
Mhm.
where all of those years, you're still probably going to have like the individual landlord. I
Mhm.
don't think one guy renting out one place is causing the housing crisis. Now, of course, my opinion is I think it's just immorally. I think it's wrong regardless. But on a policy level, though, I'm with you.
Mhm.
I get it. It's the biggest issue here is sort of big corporations and
Mhm.
big business trying to sort of suck out wealth from the country.
Mhm.
But I mean, do you think this is still a good direction? Because no other political party is really speaking about this.
I do. I think it is a good direction, and even though, as I said, with my criticisms of, people sharing articles without reading them, it has gotten people talking. So, that was the point, and it has.
Yeah.
And, I think landlordism and the housing crisis in general needs to be addressed because, as I stated, like, we're kind of at the precipice of this age where there's going to be a significant amount of homes on the market with the pensioners, um kicking the bucket. And there, what are we going to be doing with them? We need to turn them into social homes for one, at least a large percentage of them. So yeah, I do agree with the direction that the Green Party is going with this.